My grandpa was kind of a weird guy. I only knew him until I was 6, but I could just tell, even at that age, that there was something a little off about him. He lived in the family home, a semi-mansion that sat on about 30 acres of property up in East Tennessee. He would hunt out there, or so Mom said, and sometimes he would order exotic game and have it released on the property. Mom said that I had to be careful out there when I went to play in the yard on our frequent visits to Grandpa's house, because the rumors were that he didn't always catch the animals he released. The trophy room was certainly impressive, and he had heads from all sorts of things mounted on the walls. He had a stuffed grizzly bear that was bigger than I was, several exotic cats that were put in various poses, and even a bald eagle that he would hide under a curtain if anyone important came to visit. He would always wink at me and say that it was our little secret. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. My grandpa wasn't weird around kids or anything. He kind of looked like the Monopoly guy, with a white beard and a white mustache that didn't match his bald head at all. He wore these clothes that were somewhere between a robe and a suit, and he always wore slippers, even when he was outside. He had a special pair for when he went hunting, and the gun he used was easily bigger than he was. He said it was an elephant gun, and he said that one day he'd love to hunt one of those magnificent creatures. Anyway, that's not really what you're here to hear about. Grandpa died a month before my 7th birthday. Mom said it was a stroke, and we all had to go to his house for a funeral. It wasn't a big funeral. Grandpa had lots of friends, but they weren't allowed to attend. Mom said Grandpa knew movie stars and presidents, even dictators from other countries, and she would show me pictures of them on the wall in his gallery when we came to visit. I'd gotten excited at first, thinking I'd get to meet some of them, but Mom said it was just for family, so it would be us, my cousins, and my aunts and uncles. Mom had 2 sisters and a brother, and I had about 10 cousins between the 3 of them. They were all older than me. I was the baby of the family, but they never really mistreated me or anything. We all played together, the ones of us that were still young enough to play, and I remember being excited all over again when I realized that I'd get to see them. I hadn't seen my uncle's kids in probably 3 years, and my cousin Jamie and I both collected Pokemon cards, which I wanted to trade. Mom let me bring them, but said I'd have to leave them in the car until after the funeral. I know you want to play with your cousins, kiddo, but this really isn't that sort of event. I didn't know any better. I'd never been to a funeral before. I can tell you now, I've never been to a funeral like that one since. We arrived at about 8 in the morning, and we were the first to arrive. Mom had agreed to show up early so that she could help with the flower arranging and get the chairs set up. Of her siblings, Mom had always been the one that spent the most time with Grandpa. Mom was the one who gave the hospital his information whenever he had to go in. Mom was the one who signed the papers when he had to rework the will or get medical care. And Mom was the one that the coroner had called when they found Grandpa dead. I don't think Mom was responsible for his estate or anything, but she was definitely the one who got called more than anyone else. Mom was a writer, so she was usually at home working on some novel. I never thought we were rich, but I knew that Mom didn't have to go to work like everyone else's mom did. I went to public school, I ate school lunch, and I got my clothes from the mall, just like all the other kids I knew. I knew my cousins had fancy clothes and fancy toys, but Mom made it pretty clear that I got what I earned. There had always been rumors that Grandpa had gotten Mom's first book published, but I never believed them. Mom's writing was amazing, and the others were probably just jealous. So we came in to see Grandpa off, and then we'd return to our home and see what came after. As I said, the funeral wasn't a huge event. There were around 16 of us in all, and we were all dressed in our best suits and dresses, all of us looking at the casket that had been set up in Grandpa's dining room. I think all of us sensed how odd it was to have a funeral in the home where we'd celebrated Christmases and New Year's and some of the most important events of our lives. Looking at that casket, I didn't think I'd ever be able to celebrate another Christmas here, not even if Mom dragged me here kicking and screaming. It started normal enough. There were some testimonials, people saying how generous Grandpa had been and how much they would miss him, people talking about memories from times gone by, and a few of them even made toasts with the brandy that had always sat next to Grandpa's chair. My uncle was pretty tipsy when it was all said and done, and as it went on and on, I think all of us were waiting for the casket to be wheeled out so we could go have a bite to eat and head back to our homes. But the reprieve never seemed to come. We just went on talking until we were out of memories to share, and then we all sat there quietly. It was weird, looking at that lacquered coffin, but I wish I'd been allowed to go right on staring at it. The last person on the stage was Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Madreau. I had seen Mr. Madreau before. We all had, from time to time, and today he was dressed in what had to be his best suit, his wispy hair slicked back on his skull, which made him look like half a corpse himself. He cleared his throat, and we all looked up at the coffin as he unrolled a piece of paper and read aloud, "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Earl St. Clair. Mr. St. Clair has said that the matter of his inheritance has never been settled, but today he wishes to settle it for one and all. Mr. St. Clair has asked me to inform you that whoever looks away last is the heir to everything." I remember everyone in the crowd looking extremely surprised. My uncle sat forward like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. He was the oldest. He had assumed that everything would go to him, but it appeared now that there was going to be something a little different. There was a lot of low mumbling throughout those assembled, and when Mr. Madreau didn't elaborate, my uncle decided to ask. "I don't understand," he said, as he took another sip of brandy. "Look away from what?" As if on cue, we all heard a grinding coming from the area in front of the casket. The casket began to turn, and as it did, we could see Grandpa as he lay down amidst the velvet swags inside. He was still dead, his arms still crossed over his chest, but the machinery wasn't done quite yet. It tilted the old man, brought him to an upright position, so that we couldn't help but look at him. And then it became clear. Everything was on display, from his wrinkly spotted jowls to his thinning hairline to his puffy eye bags. He was my grandpa, but there was something horrific about seeing him like this. Even at 6, I couldn't properly put it to words, and I still can't. One of my cousins, Jamie, in fact, cried out and turned away, and Mr. Madreau shook his head and made a mark across the list. It appeared that this was the game, and suddenly everyone seemed to know the stakes. You wouldn't have said it was so hard, staring at a man that you loved and admired, but there was something extremely off-putting about looking at my grandfather's corpse. He had never looked that way in life, and it was like looking at a wax dummy or a particularly good piece of grotesque art. Mom had patted my arm and said that if I wanted to look away, I could, but I found that I didn't. It was my grandpa, and even though it was a little scary to look at him like this, I knew that I had to do him this favor. I had to be the last one to look away, not because I wanted his money, but because I didn't want him to look down from wherever he was and think that I'd given up because I didn't love him. I know how silly that sounds, but when you're a kid, these things make perfect sense. As I sat there and stared at my grandpa, I could hear other people turning away. Some of them were crying, others were being sick, and didn't understand why. Sure, the dead body was scary, but it was just Grandpa. Grandpa had never hurt anybody. Grandpa had helped a lot of us, in fact. I couldn't think of a time when my grandfather had ever... All thoughts slipped out of my head as his eyes slipped open, and I watched his mouth pull up into a grin. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought he was going to speak, but he didn't. He just sat there, looking like he had the punchline to a joke that he would never tell. And soon, it was just me and my mother. I had to stop myself from laughing, right up until his left eye winked. That took my breath away. He'd always winked just like that when he'd see me. It was our special exchange. It made me want to cry. I almost looked away when she started to weep. Almost. But I remembered the rules and kept my eyes firmly glued on my grandpa's body. Why was she crying? I didn't understand why any of them were so upset. But all of a sudden, she got up and started running for the exit. And Grandpa's attorney said that I was the inheritor of Grandpa's estate. As he began to clap, the coffin descended back towards the ground, and I was left very confused, but happy as well. I wouldn't understand how lucky I had been, not till the car ride home. Grandpa had left me everything. His house, his cars, his money, all the art, everything. It was all held in trust until I was old enough, of course, and Mr. Madreau said that some of the money would likely go to maintaining my grandfather's palatial estate. Mom seemed happy, but her eyes were still wet-looking. It seemed she was on the verge of crying even now, and Mr. Madreau said that he would be in touch with the rest of the paperwork. I remember asking Mom why she was crying on the way home, and she said it had been sad to see Grandpa dead. I asked her why the others had been crying, and she said it must have been the same for them as well. I told her they didn't seem sad. They had seemed happy until Grandpa had wanted to play his last game. She kept peeking at me as I talked, turning her head and taking these little looks. And then she asked me a strange question, a question I wasn't sure how to answer. Did he say anything to you? Who? I asked, not sure who she meant. Your grandpa. Did he say anything to you? I almost laughed, thinking she was joking. Of course not, Mommy. Grandpa's dead. Dead people don't talk. She didn't say anything after that, but I could see her peeking at me the whole way home. I think Mom expected there to be some fallout after the funeral, but nobody contested the will. My aunt never talked to me again, but not out of jealousy. My uncle was the same way, and they all seemed afraid of me in some way. I was just a kid, so it never really made any sense. Not until Mom died when I was 21. It was very sudden, stomach cancer that ate her up before she could even get treatment for it. And even my money couldn't save her. By then I'd inherited everything. I was living in Grandpa's old house. I offered the doctor any amount of money if he could save her. I'd have mortgaged the house if it meant my mother would live. But they said there was nothing they could do for her. Sometimes, young man, these things just happen, and there isn't anything that can be done. I remember one night, as she sat there holding my hand, she asked me something she hadn't asked me in 15 years. Something I hadn't thought about in almost that long. Please, I have to know. What did your grandpa say to you on the day of his funeral? I looked at her in disbelief, thinking she must be losing it as she lay there. I told you, Mom, he didn't say anything to me. How could he? He was dead. Dead people Don't say anything." She let go of my hand, her own seeming to go limp as she stared at the wall of the hospital room. "You got off lucky then. Maybe you really did deserve the inheritance." I asked her what she meant, and she looked at me like she had never seen me before. There was something else in there, though. Something like resolve. "I'll tell you, but only once, so you better listen closely. I had wondered, the same as you on the night of your grandpa's funeral. People were losing their minds, running off and being sick, and I didn't understand any of it. I just thought maybe they were being silly, probably because Grandpa had always loved me, just like he loved you. I was sitting there, wondering how long this was going to go on. And then his eyes opened, and he frowned at me. I thought maybe the stitch had just come undone from his mouth, and maybe the spirit gum had come off of his eyes, but then his mouth flopped open, and he started to speak. He told me I didn't deserve it, that he knew I'd only taken care of him all these years because I wanted what he had. I'd never shown it, never acted as upfront about it as the others. But he still knew. That's why you brought your boy around, so I would see him. You knew that if you wanted any of what I had, you needed to get in my good graces. I love you, Caroline, but you betrayed me in the end. Not as bad as some of the others, but betrayal is betrayal." That was when I got up and left. I got up and ran because he was right. I loved that old man. I loved him with all my heart, but I was greedy too. I let him talk to people he knew so that it would get more attention than it deserved. I let him help make my career. And then, after all that, I still coveted what he had. I didn't deserve it, but given what your uncle and your aunt told me, I got off light. Ask them if you dare. It makes no difference to me. I won't be here much longer. She died a few hours later. I'm sitting in my grandpa's study now, drinking brandy that is probably worth more than the house my mother left me in her own will. I can't bring myself to ask my relatives what Grandpa might have said to them when his casket popped itself open and we were made to play such a terrible game. I know a little of it. Grandpa left some notes behind before he died. I know some of my cousins were stealing from him. I know my uncle was also embezzling money from one of the companies that Grandpa left him in charge of. I know my aunts had been taking some of the things my grandma had left behind before she died. But there were other things. Worse things. One of my aunts had actually killed someone one night when she was driving drunk, and Grandpa had covered it up. My uncle's oldest son had gotten a girl pregnant and then beaten her nearly to death, something my uncle had asked my grandfather to smooth over. There are so many little secrets like that in his black book, the book my grandpa left in his desk. Still, the next time one of them asks for money, as they so often do, I may offer them a trade. They may have their money, as long as they tell me the secret of what that old corpse said to them before they left the room crying.
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning, as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.